Welcome to the Galactic Core Podcast. Here to review the latest films and TV shows from all your favorite intergalactic universes. Now, it's time to get your geek on. Please welcome your host, the prophesized chosen one. It's Andy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Galactic Core Podcast. It's good to see you. I hope you have all been well. And we are, of course, back talking more Marvel again. It's Loki episode 5. What a thrilling episode we had last week and left on quite a cliffhanger. So we're going to have to see, or we have seen, I should say already, because full spoilers ahead. We've seen exactly what's happened in the aftermath of the temporal loom exploding in last week's episode. So I've been excited all week to see what happens. And now, normally, I would have a guest or guests on to chat through with me, for the week's episode and get their opinion and their thoughts on Marvel, their nerdiness or geekness, and obviously the week's episode. Unfortunately, I have no guest this week, so I am all by myself, all by my lonesome. You are going to have to listen to just me talking, so I do apologise. But no, I shouldn't really apologise for the simple reason that I did have guests lined up. Unfortunately, they were super, super busy. They've had to take a break from their own podcasts, and they couldn't quite find the time, unfortunately, to jump on here with me. So, yes, you are completely stuck with me this week. So please welcome my guest. It's me! Thank you very much. So, it's me, and nothing but me this week. So thank you for joining and thank you for sticking through if you're going to for this episode. But we've got a few things to cover, not just the Loki episode. There's been a lot of things going on this week. So we've had some exciting Marvel news, we've had some interesting Marvel news, and we've had a really good trailer drop. So firstly, I would like to talk about the fact that we got a trailer for a new Marvel Spotlight, which is their new sort of umbrella of things. They're putting some things under, which I believe it's going to be more of their street hero type shows, like the Netflix type things. So, we're getting Echo coming up. We had a trailer drop for that. The shows like Daredevil are going to fall under this umbrella as well. So it's really exciting that this has been announced, and the Echo trailer looked amazing. It was a very Kingpin-driven narrative in the trailer, which is obviously great to see Vincent D'Onofrio back in his classic white suit. The first thing we see is him pretty much throwing someone up against a bin and kicking the shit out of them. So really excited for this. We do get obviously a very, very quick flash of Daredevil in this jumping over a table. Super excited he's going to be in it. Whether he's going to be back in his full-on red suit, whether it's going to be similar to the one that we saw in She-Hulk. We obviously don't know yet. We're going to have to wait and see. But what's really exciting about this is that this is going to be an MA rating. So this is a mature rating show. So it's going to be bloody. It's going to be violent. We saw a little, obviously, hint of that in the trailer with people getting beaten up, people getting shot in the head or the face. And this is the first Marvel sort of series under the Disney umbrella. Forgetting the Netflix shows, that's going to be like this. And I don't think we were expecting it to maybe cast as that, as an MA show. We were expecting Deadpool to be the first one that came out of that. So this is coming out in January of 2024. January the 10th, I believe they said. And they're still going to be dropping all the episodes at once. So I am super excited now to watch this show. The fact that it's going to be up there is a mature rating show. Lots of Kingpin by the look of it. Obviously Daredevil's going to be in and out of it. And what's interesting as well is they've said that that Maya is going to be the villain in this show. She's not going to be a hero. She's not going to be an anti-hero. She is still going to be a villain. And her powers are going to be different to what they are in the comics. They're not going to be the same. So how they address that is going to be also interesting to see. I fully trust that they've done a good job with this. To be fair, I know that originally there were comments coming out of Marvel that they weren't particularly happy with the show. They wanted to do reshoots or even drop it potentially altogether. And whether they decide to, whether part of that decision was to drop all the episodes at once because they weren't too happy with it, we can only wait and see. But I'm really excited to do it, whether they then use this format with the other type of shows that they're going to put under the Spotlight umbrella. So as we said, Daredevil, whether that's going to be episodes dropping all at once. I know that there's been a lot going on with those types of shows where they've fired a lot of the writers and some of the producers and stuff, and they've brought a lot of new people in because they said we're not happy with it. We want it to go in a different direction. So they brought writers in for the likes of Moon Knight and Loki, and producers to obviously get it going in one direction, and they're changing the way that they're formatting their shows. So instead of having individual directors for each episode, they're going to have obviously showrunners again, which is something they haven't done for a long time. So I think these are all positive moves that are going to put forward and make really good shows. So Echo, I'm really obviously happy with how that trailer was. I hope to see a little bit more, a few spots that drop before we get the full series itself dropped. But January 10th, I believe I said that comes out. Really excited to see what happens with this character and with this show moving forward. Good to see Kingpin. They addressed at the end of that trailer as well. Kingpin obviously had the patch over his eye, where it looks like obviously Maya shot him at the end of the Hawkeye series. So we'll see what happens with that. It was announced obviously maybe a couple of weeks ago now, but I was going to address it as well, that due to the ongoing actors strike and obviously what we've had with the writers strike, more delays to Marvel stuff. Deadpool's been pushed back again. Disappointing because we really obviously want to see these come out, but the writers and the actors deserve the support they're getting through the strikes, and obviously better deals that they should hopefully be getting for themselves and for the support teams and everyone that goes into the making these types of shows and films. They deserve these better packages and deserve to be treated better. So I hope that they do get that, but it does mean that we're probably going to see a knock-on effect for quite some time in terms of delays. When they set out originally, Disney and Kevin Feige, their plan for Marvel's phases 4, 5, 6, going up to the end of Secret Wars, everything looked like it was going to come out so quickly and in such a short space of time that they've obviously had to change their stance, because they've already cut back their stance in terms of phase 4 was packed with shows and films, and it was obviously banded around that they were doing a lot of quantity over quality, and they've already decided they're going to take a step back with that. And they want to obviously put a bit more quality into things, I guess like it was in phases 1 to 4. You don't necessarily have to flood us with lots of stuff, just make sure it's good quality and make sure it all is immersive and it's all tied together in the way that we've previously seen from Marvel. They have lost their touch a little bit on that. But people are saying that, is the MCU or really struggling? A lot of people obviously aren't happy with how things have gone. There's been a little bit of controversy with people like Jonathan Majors, unfortunately. Even if you can't doubt how talented an actor he is and how well he's done as his different Kang variants so far, is the MCU really struggling? That's the question that so many people put forward. People aren't happy with the stories since Endgame. We know that post-Endgame, it was always going to be a struggle for them to match up to that, because you've had the original Avengers that we became so attached to, characters that have come in and out of there since, and now we're left with changing teams, changing characters. And is it the same? No, it's not. But at the same point, we, as the viewer and as the consumer, we have to change. We can't sit around begging for them to do everything like the originals. We've got to evolve with it. At the end of the day, we don't get to choose that narrative. It's something I always say about Star Wars fans who turn around and are like, oh, well, the sequels aren't canon in my head. Cool, you want to ignore that? That's completely up to you. It doesn't change the fact that it is part of the story. We don't get to choose what's canon and what isn't. We aren't writing the shows. We're not the ones putting the product out there. We have to sit back and take it. And yep, are we allowed to complain when it's low quality or it's not very good? Absolutely. We're fans. We're the ones paying money to go and see these things and buying the merch from all of it. So we do have that right to complain. But at the end of the day, we also have to get on board and ride that journey out to the end and see how it does play out. There's always going to be ups and downs. But you can't tell me that something like Loki that we've seen for this series hasn't been high-quality Marvel. Everything doesn't always have to be full-on fight scenes and action scenes and it flowing. Something can be a slow burner or more narrative-driven than action-driven. We saw that with something like Andor. And I know that's a different franchise, but at the same point, Andor was a slow burner that took a long time to get going, but once it did, it drew you in, it sucked you in, and it turned out to be a really epic series. Similar could be said with Ahsoka, in terms of it took a little while to get going, but when it did, The story came together quite well. I feel it's been the same with Loki. Up to and before this week's episode, this series has been really good. It's not been full action paced and going at it full throttle, but it's something that's worked really, really well. And so, is Marvel really struggling? I don't think it is. I think the drop of the Echo trailer, and I can understand, and I think I said this in a different group as well, that you can make a trailer make anything look good. So you can design a good trailer for a shit show, and we can all be fooled into thinking that it's going to be really good. But I think the strength of the trailer of Echo and the response, for the most part, from it, especially in the circles that I've been in, has been really strong, and shows Marvel aren't going to fall on their knees and give up. They still want to put out good products. They're not taking as much for granted with all the changes that they're making. They understand that they have to evolve as well. And it looks like they're willing to do that, and we have to give them that chance, I think, to put themselves and their best foot forward and give us all the good stuff. And we have to be there to accept when it's good. The amount of people that have given something like Echo a negative review already and said this is going to be rubbish. These are people that, to me, want it to fail for whatever reason they've concocted in their head. At the end of the day, I think the showing of Loki and the showing of the Echo trailer has been something that's been really strong for Marvel. And you can't say right now, at this exact moment in time, that what they're putting out is utter rubbish. We've got the Marvels out I think it's at the end of this week as I'm filming this. I've got tickets to go and see it on Friday. And I'm really hopeful that it's going to be good. There's been lots of rumours of different cameos and stuff, and, it's interconnectedness that we want. People that are moaning, but it's the Marvels film, so why are there being cameos in it? And these are the same people that if there weren't cameos in it, they'd be moaning, why hasn't there been cameos? We could have had so-and-so in it. So at the end of the day, you're never going to win, but I believe that Marvel is still in a strong position, and they can and will do good things moving forward. I am looking forward to the Marvels film, to be fair. Lots of rumours of who's going to be in it. I tend to watch the first trailer of things nowadays, and then I stay away from everything else because I don't want any hints. I don't want to be spoiled. I have heard, obviously, lots of rumours of potentially Thor being in it or X-Men or anything like that. So I've stayed away from any of the secondary trailers and TV spots and all that kind of stuff because I don't want to be spoiled. But yeah, I'm really excited to see. Can't wait to see the Flurkins back as well. Those cute little bastards. So it's going to be really good. I'm going to have a review coming out of that. I think maybe the week after next, after the finale of Loki. But some other big MCU news to come out in the last week or so is that there was a big rumor going around that Marvel were considering doing a new Avengers film, but with the original Avengers cast. To me, this has caused quite a bit of a stir in the circles I've been in because it's a controversial move. I think it would potentially be a sign of weakness if Marvel was to backtrack and to bring back the original 6 Avengers, especially the ones that have passed away in terms of obviously Black Widow and Iron Man. If it was to be an alternate universe Avengers, just to get them all on screen again together, potentially that could work. But it seems to me that it would be a sign of panic from Marvel that they don't believe in their product. If they're willing to go back on some of their plans, or even if it was to just make it a one-off alternate universe Avengers film, it just seems that they're either doing that as a money grab because they don't believe that the product they're putting out there is getting them enough back in terms of revenue, or they're afraid of the product they're putting out isn't strong enough. And so therefore they want to bring the original cast back to bring people back in and to get them back into Marvel. Either way, I'm not sure this is a viable idea in the first place. I don't really see it happening. I think there's too many strong heads at Marvel to go, no. There is obviously a few that would go, yep, that would be a great money spinner. Let's get him back in. Let's get him signed on. I'm not sure how many of them would want to do it. And I'm not sure that they would want to come back and do another story that may taint the legacy of the characters that they created in the first place. So whether they do it or not, I really am not sure. I don't think it's a great idea. I think it is a sign of weakness if they did decide to do it, and it would put them on the back foot and open themselves up to far much more criticism than they need to. So fingers crossed they're not going to do it, but it's not like we wouldn't go and watch it if it did happen. But that's all the sort of main news I've got to talk about. Now, normally when I've got a guest on, I would play a game of MCU or Real Life You. And just because I don't have a guest on, doesn't mean that we're not going to play it this week. So welcome to this week's episode of MCU or Real Life You. Now, a little bit different this week because I don't have any guests, and I'm not going to actually answer the questions myself in terms of, obviously the base of this game is I would put forward an MCU character, the real life actor or actress that plays them, and then normally, a co-host or someone else, in relation to the guest I've got on the show. Obviously no guests, I'm not able to do that. So what I've done is I texted my wife earlier today, and I gave her some choices of people and said, who would you rather spend the day at a theme park with? The MCU character, the actor or actress that plays them, and me, her husband. So let's see what the choices are, and let's see who she picked. So the first choices I gave her were Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr., or me, her husband. And her answer to this was Robert Downey Jr., simply because she said that she would want to question him all day about Sherlock Holmes. She is a big Sherlock Holmes fan, and she was like, yep, if I got to spend the day with him, I would just be asking him as many questions about Sherlock as I possibly could. So I lost out on that one to Robert Downey Jr. Not exactly mad about that. Not exactly a bad choice either, just in general. I'd imagine he'd be quite fun at a theme park. So the next choices that I gave her were Jane Foster, Natalie Portman, or me, her husband, to spend the day at a theme park with. And she actually picked me. I don't think she's a huge fan of Jane Foster as a general character. And she said that, to be fair, she felt that Natalie Portman she finds her a bit beige, to be honest, in terms of just a person and what she's like. She's a decent enough actress, but she seems to obviously do things more for the money than for the love or passion of a project, which I guess as an actor-actress, there's no harm in that. At the end of the day, you are getting paid to do a job. Like many people go out and do a job, whether being an actor or actress is a bit more privileged, that's up for argument. But she does have a habit of commenting on big franchises that she's been on and saying that she's there more for the money than for the love of the project or for the love of the character. So at the end of the day, she wasn't too keen on spending the day with her or her alter ego of Jane Foster. So she picked me. Woohoo! But then the last choice I gave her, and I pretty much knew where this was going to go, I gave her the option of Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch, or myself. And she picked Benedict Cumberbatch. I don't blame her for this, and I really shouldn't have asked her this one, to be fair. She also gave me the excuse that she would want to spend the day with him at a theme park, simply because, again, being a big Sherlock Holmes fan, she would want to ask him as many questions as she could think of about Sherlock Holmes and about doing the series. But secretly, she has a big fat crush on him, and I know she wants to ride him all day long. So while she tells me one thing, that it's that it's about wanting to ask him about Sherlock Holmes questions, I know secretly it's the other thing. So again, completely my own fault for asking that question. I really shouldn't have done. But she picked Benedict. Can't really blame her when I put the choice out there. But thanks to my wife for answering those and giving us our weekly game of MCU or Real Life You. Now, we've got an episode of Loki to discuss. So, we had a fantastic episode last week. To me, it's been one of the best episodes of a Marvel TV show that we've had so far. Really did feel like high stakes were kind of back. The Victor Timely part of the episode to me was fantastic. Jonathan Majors, as we've spoken about previously, has been doing, I think, a fantastic job playing his different Kang variants. The finale of season 1 of Loki with He Who Remains was one of my favourite episodes of any series. I really did love his portrayal in there, even if it was, some people said it was a little bit goofy perhaps, but I felt that he did a really, really good job. He did a great job, obviously, in Ant-Man Quantumania, and we got to see the post-credit scene with all the various different Kangs in there. And we get to really see that it's going to be such a major thing moving forward. And I really does, on that side note, as I've already mentioned, hope that he gets to stay playing this character. I don't really see them doing too much in terms of getting him rid unless anything bad now. But last week's episode ended on that massive cliffhanger where Victor Timely steps out, gets spaghettified, and the temporal loom explodes and it races all towards them, and it picks up at that exact moment again for this week's episode. So starts off and we're back on that framed shot of Loki's eyes and him just obviously staring around, and we see that little sort of tear rolling down his cheek as he maybe thought, damn, there isn't anything I can do to stop this. He thought he'd maybe failed his mission. And he's there at the TVA. Everyone's disappeared. The place is empty, and he doesn't know what obviously the hell's going on. So he starts walking around trying to find anyone, and we find out that he is time slipping again. Time slipping is back. So whether it was the fact that it never really left him, and the fact that he maybe had just found a way to stop it previously, when in episode 1, when he got his temporal aura pulled through from the temporal loom, whether this was actually stopping the time slipping or just stabilizing it for the time being, not sure on that one. But he's time slipping again, and I thought they really started this episode off well with this, because they had him time slipping to different points of almost the same point in time in the TVA, where he sort of walks out and he sees a figure that's looking at a book, and he says hello and time slips again, and it puts him back sort of in a different part of the TVA, and he walks around, sees that everyone's deserted, picks up a handbook of the TVA, and he hears just someone say hello behind him, turns around, and it's himself from like 2 minutes earlier. And then the TVA itself starts to get spaghettified, which I can't imagine what obviously it would look like in actual real life, but I think they did a pretty good job of it, to be fair. And he obviously manages to escape at that point through his time slipping. And what we then get is he's appearing to everyone, obviously, that was in the room with him at the time of the finale of the last episode. And he's appearing to them in what seems to be their original lives on different branches of the timeline. So he appears to Casey, who is now called Frank, escaping Alcatraz back in 1962. And I think this was actually really cool, because that was actually based on a real-life convict called Frank, who did escape Alcatraz with 2 other people back in 1962. They were never seen after that, and they were assumed to have drowned when trying to cross the river to escape the island. But the fact that Marvel are just throwing that in there as a potential character based on something from real life, I thought that was just a cool little moment. So he sees Casey as this prisoner. He time slips. He obviously sees Hunter B-15 when she's being a doctor, and disappears in front of her, and she's obviously really freaked out. And we get to see him appear to OB, and it appears in front of him. Or we see OB's life as he's trying to make it as a writer, but he's still a physicist, a scientist, and the fact that he's not very successful and he's trying to plant his own books in a shop was quite amusing, to be fair. But Loki appears to him, manages to tell him exactly what's been going on, and OB completely believes him. And what's great about this as well is that the rooms that OB were in, where he seems to have his workshops and where he's been writing and everything, look very much like the rooms that he is in the TVA. They look, structurally identical. Even though he says, that they're abandoned and there's no one for miles around, and that the TVA itself is outside of time and space. Structurally they're still identical. It's just amusing that he has ended up in these rooms when he's back in his original life, so to speak, if this is his original life. So obviously Loki's explained to him that he needs to get everyone back together, and that Obi's going to build. It gives Obi a copy of the TVA handbook that he obviously kept on him, and he's like, "Cool, let's build a tempad." And he explains that the plan is to get everyone together that was originally in the room, and they can, they would have a unique temporal aura that they could pinpoint and get them back to that point in time within the TVA before the temporal loom was about to explode, and hopefully they can change something there. Loki goes through his time slipping again, and he ends up. We obviously do get this cool scene where he has arrived outside of the jet ski place, and he sees Mobius inside. I think is when he first appears. He's in front of the big balloon thing that's going off, and he obviously does a very similar thing when he arrives, which was quite amusing. But so he obviously goes inside and we get this cool shot of Mobius like on the jet ski with the background. He's like, and that was quite a funny little moment. He's obviously trying to say to a guy, "Get up here, feel the wind in your hair, feel what it would like." And the guy's like, "No, thanks, didn't really want this anyway." And Loki comes in and tells him that the TVA is gone. And Mobius doesn't understand what he's talking about. He thinks he's asking about if he's got any ATVs in stock. And he time slips out again. And then later in the episode, he reappears, obviously outside Mobius's his house when he's trying to sort out all of his kids' crap. And they're not trying to set fire to stuff. He's trying to get him to stop. And he goes and has this chat with him and explains to him what's going on. And that he, is part of this organization that needs to basically be in charge of time and space, and he needs to go and help them to put things back as they were and to fix things. Maybe it's obviously isn't sold. He's worried about his kids, and Loki's able to convince him that they are friends and that he can do this. And it was really touching to see maybe the fact that Mobius maybe unconsciously knew that he wasn't happy in his life. His wife had left him. He was stuck with 2 unruly kids. He didn't sort of have any ambition or drive. He maybe wasn't the most successful of salesmen. And before, in previous episodes, when he's talked about his life at the TVA, and he's always said, I like this life. I'm good at this job. I enjoy it. I loved working for the TVA. It gave him a purpose. It gave him something to work towards. It seems that maybe unconsciously he knew that this part of his life was better. And it's harsh to say that, I'm not a father yet, so I can't really say. But maybe part of him was relieved that he had this job at the TVA, and it was better than the life that he had before, and it was doing something better than he was able to do before. So I wonder if part of him felt like that. But Loki manages to convince him that you need to come with us, and it's to help. What you're going to do is going to help protect your boys. And Obi appears through a time door with a rather large tempad that he's built. And Loki's like, "Wow, you managed to build a tempad so quickly." And he's just like, "Well, I don't know if you call 18 months quick, but I managed to do it, and it cost me my job, and it cost me my wife." I'm not sure if that was a little quote or a dig at anything else going on, but it was still amusing that it's taken him all this time, and to Loki it was a blink of an eye. But basically, he manages to go off and convince everyone to come with him, and that they're part of this plan to save the multiverse. And they've got almost all of them back at Obi's place, and he knows that he's got to go and talk to one more person. So he goes off to see Sylvie. What I wasn't sure about here was Sylvie thrown back to her life in the 80s in this branch timeline, or did she manage to use He Who Remains tempad to escape back to that particular branch? It seems a bit odd if everyone else in that room was thrown back to their original lives before the TVA. That where would it throw Sylvie? Would it have thrown her back to when she was a kid? Or did she manage to escape herself? It's the same point I was thinking in terms of, did the temporal loom explosion throw Loki into that moment in time that we find him at the start of this episode, or did he time slip to that moment? So I think there's a question or two that needs to be answered there. But yeah, did Sylvie escape back to there, or would is that where the explosion threw her to? But the fact that she seems to have the memories, no one else has the memories of Loki or what went on before, or what they were doing at the TVA, whereas Sylvie obviously plainly remembers him. So it seemed to me that maybe she was able to escape at the very last second, and this is why she's able to retain her memories. Otherwise, would it not have thrown her back? I guess maybe previously her timeline had been pruned, when she was taken originally. So I don't know if that timeline still actually exists. I'm guessing not. So she couldn't have potentially been thrown back to that timeline, and it threw her back to there because that's where her life currently was. Anyway, Loki goes to have a conversation with her, and when he does, obviously we see her food and drink sort of spaghettify away, and we're like, oh, this is going to start happening now, it seems, to these places. And they go to have a drink at a bar, and this is where we actually get Sylvie admitting for the first time, I think, that yes, she's been selfish. Because Loki's like, oh, you're being so selfish when everything, the entire multiverse at stake. And she's like, of course I'm being selfish. I want to have a life. I want to be able to do things that I am choosing to do. And before, that wasn't the case, because ever since she was taken by the TVA as a kid, she's been on the run, she's been doing her own thing, she's had to do everything to survive. And turns out that even that wasn't a choice that she got to make, because He Who Remains had paved the road for that to happen for her, up to the point where they actually got to meet in the season finale. So of course she's going to be selfish, but she's questioning Loki about why are you doing this? And he's like, because I want to save the multiverse, I want to save the TVA. And she's like, that's not the reason. You've got to be a bit more honest with yourself. And it finally gets to the point where he admits, I don't want to lose my friends. Everyone in that room was someone I consider a friend. And after everything he's been through in his life, where he's always been slightly overshadowed by Thor, maybe his father didn't fully trust him in the same way. He's always been a bit of a renegade himself and not always been the most likable. He finally got to a stage where, even with everything going on, he felt like he fit in with this group and trusted them, and he was doing something worthwhile by trying to get the TVA back to where it needed to be. And it's obviously maybe part of this new Loki that we've seen evolve, because we all know this is the Loki that this obviously wasn't main timeline Loki that we had and that was killed in Infinity War. This was Loki that escaped after the Battle of New York in the 2012. And so this Loki's had to go through a lot of character development over these last couple of stories. It's something I touched on a few episodes ago, that, is he now becoming the good guy and becoming more of a hero than he is a villain? He still obviously has that side deep inside of him. And I think it would take a lot to still rid him of it, but he's now starting to think about the greater good. And he wants to have people around him, and he wants to have people that he cares about. And that's obviously a big change for him. But at the end of the day, Sylvie rejects his request to go with him and to be able to try and go back to the TVA and sort things out. She's like, got a life, got to go live it, and disappears off. And then we see this bit where Sylvie goes to this record store, sits down, starts listening to this track, and then everything behind her in the street, the guy in the shop start getting spaghettified. And I thought it looked quite cool when the guy was running over to Sylvie and she tried to reach out for him, and everything's being spaghettified. And she sits there and everything's basically being destroyed, and the record spins up as it gets spaghettified. And she obviously activates the 10 pad and steps through to go and find Loki, who seems to be moping around, telling everyone that this was no longer going to go ahead. He wanted to do things for his own selfish reasons. And the fact we're getting a Loki that's got to the stage, again, as part of his character development, where he's saying, I want to do this, but it was for me. You people should go home, live the lives that you've had. Even though he's trying to give them a choice now, and coming to the TVA and helping out, he's kind of accepted the fate that this wasn't really his decision to make. And it's been banded around a lot in the last week or two that, is this a time loop, so to speak, in terms of how things got created, of how the TVA came about? Is Victor Timely actually He Who Remains and was put on that same path? Is then Loki the one that ends up unnaturally creating the TVA and putting things in a time loop, and is he the one that, for example, recruits Mobius to become an agent of the TVA and recruits the others to come back there from where their normal lives were? And he's obviously telling them, it's time you go home. There's nothing more that I can do. And Sylvie turns up and he's like, everything's getting destroyed. Branches are dying, they're getting spaghettified because the temporal loom's exploded, and now we have to do something. And Loki's like, yes, we can do something now. All of us are here together. He's like, the pens in the cup, we've got everyone here together. And then things start disappearing from the room. The tempad disappears. One by one, everyone starts to disappear through the spaghettification. And this is where he obviously starts to time slip a little bit again. He goes back a little bit and then goes back a little bit more from the time slipping. And this is where he obviously chats to Obi and goes, I've done it. I've managed to control my time slipping. Whether it's obviously just that absolute desperateness that basically forces him to time slip in the way that, I think they touched on it. I think like in the original Deadpool, it was the fact that, activating stress or putting somebody into a state of extreme stressfulness triggers or activates their mutation. In the same way that just severe stress and anxiety and everything like that kind of trigger Loki's ability to time slip if he then learns how to tap into it. It seems to be something similar down that route. But he basically learns to control his slipping, and he says, I'm now going to rewrite the story. And he then time slips again as everything around him gets spaghettified. And he goes back, and we find him, as the finale of this episode is him appearing back in the engine room of the temporal loom, stood next to Obi before the loom explodes, and I'm guessing at the moment before Victor Timely walks out. So, is now Loki becoming Loki, the god of stories? For those of you that don't know, there was a comic book run in about 2014, I think it was, called Loki, Agents of Asgard, where he became more of a hero than a villain, but he gained the ability to perceive, manipulate, and rewrite the narratives and stories of people around him. So he could influence the world and shape his and other people's stories that were being told. At some point, he was even able to stop Ragnarok from happening. So he also, I think, was able to manipulate the gods of Asgard as well and bend them to the will that he wanted. So becomes quite a powerful person in his own right doing this, but it seems like they've gone down this right, especially since he says, I'm going to rewrite the story. So it seems they've given him this new ability with the time slipping, and he's now going to have this ability to go back and change people's, or even forward perhaps, and change people's stories, or change the way that the story unfolds. So, Loki, God of Mischief, is he going? And now we're getting Loki, God of Stories. This episode overall, though, did it feel... I was unsure how to feel about it. I watched it a couple of times since, and it felt, again, like whilst they're trying to obviously get him to a stage where he does something dramatic for the finale, or the finale is going to play out in a dramatic way, it seems to me like this was more of a filler episode. After everything that's gone in the last couple of episodes that built up to that dramatic one ending at the end of episode 4, this episode felt like it needed more from it for me personally. It did feel like just a filler episode, and when you've only got 6 episodes in an entire series, nothing can be filler really. Things can be slow and you can build up to something, but it felt like they could have gotten to this stage in half an episode. In this particular episode, and had something else going on. So, was it a great episode? I don't think necessarily. It was good to see some of these people in their original lives on their different timelines and what they're up to, and the fact that it raises obviously questions of, is Loki the one that then recruits them to the TVA and starts this whole weird sort of time circle going on? The question is, what role will Loki then play moving forward? I'm not going to say any predictions about the finale, apart from obviously they do manage to sort things out. I'd heard, because I didn't watch anything like the mid-season trailer, so I've not seen anything, but I've heard a few bits and pieces. People saying, "Oh, we see him out there with the throughput multiplier, or he's out in the temporal radiation." So he obviously does something to be able to stop it from exploding again, and so therefore Victor Timely is going to survive. And is this how he becomes He Who Remains, or does he become an evil Victor Timely and tries to take things over? If Loki now has this ability to reshape the story or the narrative that's being written, will he technically take the place of He Who Remains as someone who oversees the flow of time in the multiverse, or for the sacred timeline, or the different branches that have come from there, but does it in not a god ruling over everything or type of way? He does it without interfering, so he looks over everything to make sure that things go well, and not dissimilar to a watcher, I guess, in the fact that he's watching over everything, but he's not intending to interfere. He just want to make sure everything's done well and everything goes well for everyone. So will he be the one that takes the seat at the head of the table and overlooks the flow of time? Does this result in him being one of the leaders of heroes that will go up against whatever Kang or various Kangs in Kang Dynasty? They keep saying that the end result of this series will have obviously a major setup for Kang Dynasty, which I believe it will, even if that's going to be another 3 or 4 years away. So the big question is, where does this leave everyone at the end of this series? Basically, I think there's 3 major people that they need to give us answers to as to where they sit by the end of this next episode. And that's going to be, obviously, Loki. Where does Sylvie sit in terms of what position is she going to be in? Is she going to want to go back to her normal life, or is she going to have a change of attitude and try and oversee things potentially with Loki? And then obviously Victor Timely, again, he is a Kang variant. He's obviously been set on a slightly different path. Again, is everything they're doing technically, I think I discussed it in a previous episode, that is everything that is being done in this series technically everything that's been done before in a sort of time loop. But it's going to be something in Kang Dynasty, the film itself, that breaks the time loop and changes the future. Because things aren't obviously going to go back to the way that they were before. So what happens to Loki, what happens to Sylvie, and what happens to Victor Timely at the end of the series? Not that long to wait. I'm excited to see what does happen in the series. I think it's got to be a big episode. I think this is where Marvel have dropped the ball a little bit sometimes on some of their Disney Plus TV shows with their finales. They haven't gone in hard enough on what they need to do. Excuse me. And sometimes you walk out of these finales with more questions than answers. And I get that you want to set some things up for the future, but it does annoy me sometimes when we've got to this point where everything has to end with questions and cliffhangers. What's wrong with wrapping up a series in a nice bow and either starting it, new questions in the next series, or having new questions put in front of those characters further down the line? Why do we have to end everything on a cliffhanger? Why can't we wrap up everything in a nice way where, if they wrapped everything up in the finale where Sylvie's gone off to have her own life, Victor decided to turn evil, he's going to go off somewhere, and then Loki's the one that sits in charge of the Citadel at the end of time, overlooking the multiverse as its guardian, so to speak. I hope we get something like that. I don't want to be left with loads of questions and loads of what ifs and cliffhangers. I think that will just annoy me, to be fair. Since we've still got quite a few projects to go, why would they leave us with so many questions if we didn't get anything else answered between now and, say, Kang Dynasty for these particular characters? They've tried to bring a lot of characters into the MCU, through Phase 4 and 5, as well as obviously having some of our original ones. And they do have to start tying everything together and putting it towards. And we obviously, have seen bits of that, because we're going to see, I think, a lot more Kang variants popping up here and there, if not in almost every single project in some capacity. So I'm excited to see where this finale goes. I have loved this series so far. And obviously, like I said, I'm not going to make no predictions because my predictions normally turn out to be rubbish. I just want to sit back and enjoy the finale episode and see where it goes. So that's obviously coming out just before this weekend coming. It's going to be exciting to see what happens. And then after that, we obviously got the Marvels film. I will be back next week to obviously review the finale of Loki. I'm also going to be guest hosting the Marvel Plus podcast to my friend Brett Scott. He's got some stuff going on. He's not been able to host a couple of episodes, so he's asked me to step in with a couple of guests and host his show for his episode 6 review of Loki. So it'll be really good once that's come out, if you can all tune into that as well, because I've got a couple of guests coming on there. Familiar faces from my show, maybe not so familiar to Brett's crowd, but that'll be really good to obviously guest host Brett's show. So I'm really grateful to Brett that he's given me an opportunity to cover his show for a week. But next couple of weeks, like I said, we've got Loki finale coming up. I've got the Marvels to review after that. And then we're going into a different period of time where I'm going to be doing a few different things because, I've got Gen V that I want to chat about and review now that that's ended. And with no real sort of big shows coming out, I don't know if we're still getting What If Season 2 sort of sometime around Christmas or in December. And we do have Echo dropping in January. But apart from that, there's going to be, a decent period of time without anything major in terms of films and TV shows coming around. So I'm going to be doing some different reviews of things. I'm going to be doing some Star Wars reviews of everything in episode order, and some of the TV shows as well. But that's all going to be going in timeline order. I'm going to be doing some character profiles. So, a question of characterization is going to be the name of the little sort of episodes I'm going to be doing, where I'm picking different characters, whether it's Darth Vader, Superman, Iron Man, whoever I feel like, and hopefully have some guests on to chat with you in depth about those particular characters and what they've been like on screen. So I've definitely got some stuff planned for the future to keep us going whilst there maybe not be any major films or TV series coming out for a while. Please make sure that you are tuning in for this, because your support does mean a lot to me, and it's always nice to hear from different people that you are loving the content I've been putting out and that you are tuning in every week. Please obviously drop a like, drop a review, give us a follow. You'll obviously see in the show notes where you can follow me and where else you can either listen or watch the podcast, whether it's Spotify, Apple, YouTube. And obviously I do drop a few bits on TikTok every now and again as well. But I'll be back next week, and as I mentioned, I will be reviewing the finale of Loki. Until then, catch you all later.
Thanks for tuning in to the Galactic Core Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. But until next time, go get your geek on.